So for all of the beef and all of the antagonistic feelings that present themselves every time Brad Marchand plays off against Patty Maroon, they're going to have to put that all aside now. Because Pat Maroon has been traded from the Minnesota Wild to the Boston Bruins, and the return seems to be a late conditional pick. And this is a pretty small move in the grand scheme of things, not the biggest deal. I mean, nobody really thought that Pat Maroon would have gotten a huge return for the Minnesota Wild anyway, but at 35 years old, 6'3", 234, left-handed left-wing guy, signed to the end of this season making $800,000, you could very well say that this was the kind of force needed on a team like Boston to guarantee yet another Stanley Cup. Pat Maroon won 3 of them in a row and made the finals a 4th time. So when it comes to Pat Maroon, there certainly is a certain profile, a standard, you could say, of caliber of play that his teams usually have. The Minnesota Wild this season, unfortunately, have not been as good as those Tampa Bay and St. Louis teams, but they've been okay, and thus getting themselves a late-round pick for Pat Maroon seems to be on their priority list instead. Maroon has 16 points in 49 games played, on pace for about 23 over the course of a full season. He hasn't really been the best point producer, but that's okay. He had a 42-point year with the Edmonton Oilers like almost a decade ago, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, but that's few and far between from what he's capable of doing now. So heading over to Boston, adding some extra grit, adding some extra sandpaper, it's going to be really interesting seeing him play with Brad Marchand, considering the amount of beef and the conflict that seemed to have arisen every time these guys were on the ice against each other over the years, especially during those Tampa days. My goodness, it was a pretty big deal. But interesting to note in regards to Pat Maroon, when you go over to the Anaheim Ducks teams that he was so good on, you talk about some of the guys that were included on those rosters. Hey, guess what? Hampus Lindholm is right here. So there is a current Bruin that is already familiar with Pat Maroon and his game. I think there was an interview done just a few minutes ago where Hampus Lindholm said, yeah, it's going to be really good to have him in the lineup, have this guy as yet another teammate. He's a good worker, hard-working guy, and of course the grit that he brings to the game is unmeasurable because he has himself that quality. He can flatten guys like a pancake, he can fight, and he can get under his opponent's skin with his words. And all it costs the Bruins for a guy like that is a late-round conditional pick. So, pretty small trade here, but it's going to be really funny to see him playing with Marchand. I think that's the biggest angle that we're going to take away from this. And if Pat Maroon can go out there and provide even some sort of offensive value in the postseason, like you talk about 4 goals, 6 points in 23 games, 2 goals, 4 points in 23 games, 1 goal, 6 points in 25 games, and then 7 points when the Blues won. If he can contribute at least once in a while, like every few series he scores a big goal, that's all you want out of a guy, especially as a late-round pick being the return. But all in all, this is a pretty solid pickup for the Bruins, especially considering the price. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Patrick Maroon getting traded from the Wild to the Bruins for a late-round conditional pick. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.